A fifth-round quarterback is not supposed to get superstar treatment. Period. But right now, Shedeur Sanders is breaking every rule the NFL ever wrote. While most late-round rookies are fighting just to make the roster, Shedeur is signing elite endorsement deals with Nike and Gatorade, the same brands that only back generational faces of sports. And that's exactly why people inside the league are losing their minds. This isn't just about sneakers, this isn't just about marketing, this is about power, control, and a system that suddenly looks outdated. Think about it for a second. The NFL draft is designed to decide value. It's supposed to determine who matters and who doesn't. But Shedeur just flipped that script completely. He slid to the fifth round and somehow walked out with first-round branding, first-class visibility, and superstar-level backing. That doesn't sit well with old-school decision-makers who believe draft position equals status. And here's the wild part. Nike didn't wait for Shedeur to prove it on Sundays. They went all in before he ever took a regular season NFL snap. That tells you something big is happening behind the scenes. Because when the biggest athletic brand in the world plants their flag on a player this early, it's never random. It's strategic. It's calculated. And it usually means they see something coming that the rest of the league hasn't caught up to yet. So the question isn't whether Shedeur deserves this attention. The real question is why the NFL didn't see it coming. Let's break down what actually set this whole thing off, because this wasn't some quiet endorsement deal that slipped under the radar. This was Nike making a loud, deliberate statement. It started with a simple post. Coach Prime shared photos of unreleased Nike sneakers tied directly to Shedeur. And if you looked closely, you saw the word legendary stamped across the back, flipped upside down, stylized, intentional. That wasn't decoration. That was branding. That was Nike planting a flag and telling the world, we're building something here. Now pause for a second. Name another fifth-round quarterback who's ever received player-exclusive footwear, custom colorways, and signature branding this early in their career. You can't, because it doesn't exist. This has never happened before at this level. Nike isn't just sending Shedeur free gear and hoping he wears it. They've rolled out custom Browns colorways, practice exclusives, pre-game statement pieces, and reports suggest full-scale marketing campaigns are already in motion. That's the kind of treatment usually reserved for franchise cornerstones, not developmental backups. And here's what makes it even crazier. This deal wasn't signed after the draft. From what's been reported, Nike locked Shedeur in before draft night when most analysts had him projected much higher. When he slid to the fifth round, Nike didn't panic. They didn't renegotiate. They doubled down. That decision alone sent shockwaves through NFL circles. Because suddenly, a player teams passed on multiple times is being positioned as a cultural face of the sport. That's not supposed to happen. The draft system is designed to control the narrative, but Nike just took that control away. And it doesn't stop there. Add in the Gatorade partnership, another elite-tier brand that rarely hands out deals to unproven NFL rookies, and the message becomes even louder. Shedeur isn't being marketed as potential. He's being marketed as a star in waiting. And that's where the tension really starts. Because when outside powerhouses like Nike step in and elevate a player beyond team hierarchy, it shifts leverage. It changes perception, and it forces the league to react instead of dictate. But that wasn't even the most controversial part, because what these deals represent goes far deeper than sneakers. Here's the part nobody in league offices wants to say out loud. This isn't really about shoes. It's about control. For decades, the NFL has operated on a simple system. Teams draft players, teams decide value, teams control opportunity, and most rookies fall in line. Hopping the league gives them a chance to build a name. Shedeur Sanders just flipped that entire model upside down. Because now you've got a fifth-round quarterback walking into the league already backed by Nike and Gatorade, brands that normally wait years before committing this kind of money and exposure. That means Shedeur doesn't need to wait for validation from front offices. His brand is already bigger than his draft slot, and that terrifies owners. Think about what this signals. If a player drafted in the fifth round can generate elite-level attention and endorsement power, what does that say about the draft process itself? What does it say about scouting departments that passed on him? And what does it say about the league's ability to rank talent? That's the uncomfortable truth. Nike didn't see a backup quarterback. They saw a cultural asset. They saw engagement numbers. They saw social reach. They saw a fan base that follows Shedeur across platforms regardless of where he plays, and they decided that was more valuable than a draft grade. That decision exposes a bigger shift happening in sports right now. Influence matters. Visibility matters. Personality matters. The league is no longer the only gatekeeper of stardom. And that's why there's tension behind the scenes. Because when a player builds leverage before ever starting a game, it changes how teams approach contracts, development, and even playing time. A quarterback with massive off-field power brings pressure. Cameras follow him. Fans demand opportunities. Media attention intensifies. And suddenly, coaches can't quietly bury someone on a depth chart without backlash. That's not how the NFL likes to operate. Owners prefer predictable hierarchies. They prefer draft position to dictate status. But Shedeur's Nike partnership breaks that mold completely. It creates a scenario where market value doesn't match football politics. And that gap keeps growing. Because every post, every sneaker reveal, every legendary branding drop reminds the league that this kid isn't playing by the old rules. He's creating his own lane. And once that door opens, others will follow. But here, where things get even more interesting, because Nike didn't just invest in Shedeur for hype. They're betting on something much bigger than marketing. This is where the story goes from flashy sneakers to long-term strategy. Nike didn't invest in Shedeur Sanders just because he's trending. They didn't design custom colorways and player exclusives just to chase short-term buzz. What they're really doing is placing a future-facing bet on the next generation of football stars. And that's important, because Nike already understands something the NFL is still slow to accept. Today's athletes aren't just players, they're platforms, they're content creators. They're brands with built-in audiences. Shedeur fits that profile perfectly. Look at his reach. Millions of followers across social media. Viral clips every week. Constant national conversation whether he's winning, losing, or just warming up. That type of visibility is gold for a company like Nike. It gives them organic marketing that no ad campaign can buy. And here's the wild part. Shedeur hasn't even had a full NFL season yet. Nike is betting that once he finally gets consistent reps, consistent development, and a real opportunity to lead an offense, his on-field performance will match his off-field momentum. If that happens, this deal becomes legendary for Nike too. That's why they leaned into the legendary branding so hard. They're not just selling shoes, they're selling a storyline, the overlooked quarterback, the son of a legend, the player who fell in the draft but rose in culture. That narrative is powerful, emotional, and easy for fans to connect with. And Nike knows storytelling better than anyone. This is the same company that turned Jordan into mythology, that built LeBron into a global empire before he even stepped on an NBA court, that transformed athletes into icons. So when people say Shedeur hasn't earned this yet, they're missing the point. Nike isn't rewarding past accomplishments, they're investing in future dominance. And the timing matters. With football culture shifting towards social engagement, personality-driven fandom, and younger audiences, Nike needs new faces to carry the torch. Shedeur represents that new era: confident, visible, vocal, unapologetic, marketable. Meanwhile, many traditional NFL stars stay quiet, avoid controversy, and rarely connect directly with fans. That's safe for teams, but it's boring for brands. Shedeur isn't boring. He generates conversation, he creates moments, he moves attention, and in today's sports economy, attention is currency. Which brings us to the next layer of this story, because Nike's move doesn't just affect Shedeur. It's quietly changing how future rookies will approach their careers. Here, where things get really interesting, because Shedeur Sanders isn't just benefiting from this moment. He's changing the blueprint for every rookie that comes after him. For decades, the NFL had an unwritten rule: you get drafted, you stay quiet, you earn your stripes, you wait your turn. You don't build too much noise until the league decides you deserve it. But Shedeur just flipped that entire mindset upside down. Instead of waiting for validation from teams, he built his value before stepping on an NFL field. Instead of letting draft position define his worth, he used his college success, social presence, and personality to attract major brands directly. And now Nike's move proves that strategy works. Future rookies are watching this closely. They're seeing that you don't have to be a first-round pick to get elite opportunities. You don't need immediate starting reps to build a following. You don't need permission to create a brand. You just need leverage, and leverage now comes from audience, engagement, and cultural relevance. That's dangerous for old-school NFL thinking. Because once players realize they can secure financial power outside of contracts, team leverage shrinks fast. A rookie making serious money through endorsements doesn't feel the same pressure to accept low deals, sit quietly, or play politics. They have options, and options change behavior. Shedeur's situation sends a loud message: control your narrative early. Instead of hiding behind helmets and press conferences, players are now encouraged to build direct relationships with fans, to show personality, to create content, to become recognizable faces instead of anonymous jersey numbers. And brands love that shift. Nike doesn't want quiet stars. They want magnetic personalities. They want athletes people talk about even when games aren't happening. Shedeur checks every one of those boxes. But here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This also creates pressure. When a fifth-round pick gets superstar-level branding, expectations rise fast. Cameras follow harder. Critics get louder. Every bad throw gets clipped. Every mistake becomes viral. The spotlight doesn't wait for development anymore. And Shedeur knows that. That's why this move is bold on both sides. Nike is betting that he can handle the pressure. Shedeur is betting on himself to deliver when the real opportunity finally comes. Because once you step into this lane, there's no hiding. You either rise into the moment, or the moment swallows you. And that leads directly into the biggest question of all. What happens when Shedeur finally gets his real shot on the field? This is the moment everything has been building toward. All the branding, all the hype, all the controversy, all the Nike investment. It only truly matters when Shedeur Sanders finally gets consistent, meaningful snaps on an NFL field. Because that's when perception turns into reality. And here's what makes this situation different from most rookies. Shedeur isn't walking into the league as an unknown project. He's already battle-tested. He played under non-stop media pressure in college. He dealt with elite defenses, loud environments, national spotlight games, and constant criticism. That mental toughness matters more than people realize. Most fifth-round quarterbacks enter quietly. Shedeur entered with cameras following him everywhere. That's pressure training. When he finally gets real opportunities, not just backup reps or limited packages, the spotlight won't be new to him. He's been living in it for years. That's exactly why Nike feels comfortable attaching their brand to his rise instead of waiting for safe confirmation. And make no mistake, the league is watching closely. If Shedeur performs early, even in small flashes, the narrative flips instantly. Headlines change, analysts shift tone, fans rally, and suddenly that fifth-round label stops mattering. History has shown this before. When underdogs succeed, the league embraces them fast. But the opposite is also true. If he struggles early, critics will pounce. They'll question the endorsements. They'll attack the branding. They'll say Nike jumped too soon. That's the risk built into this entire situation, which makes this stretch of his career the most important phase yet. This isn't just about football success. It's about credibility. It's about proving that confidence wasn't misplaced, that belief wasn't premature, that investment wasn't reckless. And here's the part fans don't always consider. Shedeur isn't just playing for himself anymore. He's playing for his brand partners, for the image Nike is selling, for young athletes watching his path, for the idea that draft position doesn't define destiny. That adds weight, but it also adds fuel. Some players shrink under that pressure, others thrive on it. And everything about Shedeur's personality suggests he feeds off moments like this. He's vocal, he's competitive, he embraces the spotlight instead of running from it. That mindset is rare. And it's exactly why this story doesn't feel like a normal rookie arc. It feels like the beginning of something bigger, a turning point where marketing, culture, and performance collide. Because once Shedeur steps onto the field wearing those legendary cleats, the message is clear. The era of waiting your turn is over. Now comes the real test. Now here, where things get even more interesting. And this part needs to be framed carefully, because nothing has been officially confirmed yet. There's been growing buzz online and inside sneaker circles that Nike's planned April release tied to Shedeur Sanders could line up with a subtle brand reset. Multiple fan pages and insiders have been speculating about one specific detail, a possible return to Shedeur's iconic number 2. Again, this is unverified. No official announcement, no press release, just consistent chatter from people who track athlete branding moves closely. But the timing is what's raising eyebrows. Nike isn't just dropping generic cleats. Reports suggest this April launch includes player-exclusive designs with Shedeur's personal logo, ice blue soles, and limited colorways built around his legendary theme. That's not a casual release schedule. That's coordinated branding. And here, why the jersey number rumor matters. At Colorado, number 2 became part of Shedeur's identity. It was on merch. It was on social posts. It became visually tied to his brand. If he were to switch back at the NFL level, even later down the line, that instantly creates a new wave of demand, new jerseys, new merch runs, new sneaker tie-ins. From a marketing standpoint, that's powerful. It's been said by branding analysts that companies like Nike often prepare alternate rollout strategies months in advance. That includes visual assets, number alignment, and colorway matching. So when people see these April sneaker leaks surfacing alongside number speculation, it naturally fuels curiosity. And let's be honest, Nike doesn't move randomly. Every release window is calculated. Every aesthetic decision serves a larger story. If Shedeur's branding is evolving this early in his NFL career, it signals long-term planning, not short-term hype. But here's the bigger picture. Even without a number change, the April drop alone is massive. Fifth-round rookies don't get signature-style releases in their first offseason. That's unheard of. That alone tells you Nike is positioning Shedeur as a long-term asset, not a gamble. And if the number rumor turns out to be true later, that just pours gasoline on the fire. It would instantly turn early Browns jerseys into collector pieces. It would reset his visual identity, and it would show just how far ahead his team is thinking. Right now, nothing is confirmed, but the noise is getting louder. And when brands start moving this aggressively before a player even takes a full season snap, that's never accidental. Which brings us to the real question. What does all this branding power actually do to the NFL itself? Because this isn't just about sneakers anymore, and what happens next could shift the league's entire player hierarchy. At this point, it should be clear that what's happening with Shedeur Sanders has moved far beyond cleats, contracts, or draft position. This is about a shift in how power works in professional sports. For decades, teams controlled the narrative. They decided who mattered. They decided who got marketed. They decided who became the face. But Shedeur just proved that era is cracking. Nike didn't wait for permission from the NFL. They didn't wait for a depth chart promotion. They didn't wait for highlight reels on Sunday Night Football. They placed their bet early, loudly, and confidently. And that decision alone sends a message across the league. Star power is no longer dictated by draft boards. It's built through influence, identity, and cultural pull. That's why this moment feels uncomfortable to traditional decision makers. It exposes something they don't like admitting. The system that determines value doesn't always reflect real-world impact. A fifth-round pick shouldn't be moving merchandise like this. A rookie shouldn't be commanding this much attention, but Shedeur is doing it anyway. And the scariest part for the establishment, this is just the beginning. If Shedeur performs even moderately well when he finally gets consistent reps, this entire situation accelerates. More deals, bigger campaigns, wider reach. And suddenly, the narrative flips completely. The same people questioning Nike's decision today will be pretending they saw it coming. But what makes this bigger than football is what it represents to the next generation. It tells young athletes that you don't have to wait to be validated. You don't have to fit into old molds. You don't have to let gatekeepers define your ceiling. If you build your brand, protect your identity, and stay consistent, you can create leverage before anyone hands you opportunity. That's powerful. Shedeur Sanders isn't just chasing wins. He's reshaping how athletes move in the modern era. Ownership can complain, critics can doubt, comment sections can argue. None of that changes what's already happening. Nike made their move. The culture is watching, and the league is being forced to adapt. So whether you believe Shedeur deserves this spotlight or think he still has something to prove, one thing is undeniable: this story isn't slowing down. It's speeding up. And the moment he finally gets his full opportunity on the field, that's when this conversation changes forever.